Steve, Pronita, thank you so much for joining me and us for this conversation. I hope that today, as we talk, we can give a little bit of information and background and insight into what the energy is in DC right now. What is noise, and where is there the important work happening and opportunity to influence it as we look to both today in the Hill visits and then moving forward over the year. I hope that you both will add a little bit of depth to the intro that we had from our when we walked on the stage, so I won't go into too much more detail there. I think that what would be great is to help us unpack what's actually happening and what strategic engagement looks like right now in a way that adheres to and brings workers and businesses forward with momentum. So I want to start at the beginning, at the past, at today, and ask, if the past year is prologue, what can we expect over the next year, few months, few hours, around and in DC on economic policy more broadly, and then on skills?
Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Katie and Brooke and the whole National Skills Coalition team for having me. My name again is Pronita Gupta, and I work for an organization called Workshop. Our mission is to strengthen worker rights. And we do this by centering those most impacted, leveraging federal expertise and partnering with governments, unions, community-based organizations, and organizers to really advance policies that support and strengthen worker rights and protections. So that being said, it's hard not to feel disheartened and discouraged by what we've seen happen in this past year, everything from the significant cuts to education and workforce development programs, to the cuts to basic supports that will impact millions of families, as well as seeing the consolidation of programs at the Department of Education, Department of Labor, the elimination of agencies and programs. And what we're really seeing is a loss of critical talent that's going to impact the efficacy and the continuity of some of these programs. So those are some of the things that I think I'm most concerned about. In addition to that, we've seen a loss of $25 billion in investments in the clean energy economy. That has ramifications, especially in states and localities. These are over 30,000 anticipated jobs that have disappeared or may be disappearing in scores of communities. So, those are some of the things that I feel like we're really concerned about. Now for the bright spots. I think what's exciting is that what we were able to see through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act and those investments was the seeding of a lot of partnerships across employers, across communities, across unions, and a recognition about the importance of the workforce system and why training matters. We're trying to create good jobs, and so I think that there is an ecosystem that has been developed, thanks to all of you, that can continue to be strengthened. These investments, while many of them have disappeared and many have them been cut back, not all of them are gone. So there's still opportunities to move forward on those investments and to keep building workforce development programs, building on these partnerships that are informed by workers and employers and communities, and really continue to build out the pipeline of talent and to really strengthen our ecosystem. The second is continuing on that theme. We had used community benefit plans. I had served in the Biden-Harris administration. We had used community benefit plans as a way to ensure that federal public dollars were being used and were being used in an accountable way to create good jobs and ensure equity in communities, and that community needs were being met while we were building and developing the clean energy economy. That's still being used, whether it's in the clean energy economy or just in developments. There's local dollars, whether it be at the local level or the state level, public dollars being used all over the country. How can that be leveraged to continue to ensure that we're bringing, again, employers, communities, unions, service providers together to really negotiate project by project what makes sense for each community? And that often entails good jobs where you need good training programs. It ensures that you're creating pipelines through local hiring provisions, so people in the local community are benefiting from these jobs. And there's accountability and transparency about how these dollars and how these projects are working, which actually gives social license to the employers and the businesses to build faster, to build on time, to stay on budget, and to be able to go through some of the permitting and other processes much faster. So CBAs continue to be a real bright spot. I would say the other piece is the innovations that are happening at the state and local level. And I'll speak to one, which I'm really excited about and I wrote about, which is the Pacific Gateway, which is the Long Beach. Is Long Beach in the house? I wonder, anyone from Long Beach? The Long Beach Workforce Development Board, which actually invested with the help of the Workers Lab in an app to help gig workers, to be able to ensure workers who want flexibility but want good jobs, to be able to find those and really match make with employers who have these needs using a platform. But what's innovative about it is that the Workforce Development Board there is actually working with workers to identify their needs, working with the employers to identify their needs, doing that matchmaking over an app, and they're actually creating W-2 jobs. So these are workers, these are good jobs, they have benefits. The employer of record, in this case, is Pacific Gateway, and there are a few other nonprofits who are serving as employers of records. Other employers are paying into a fund to ensure that there's benefits and other supports for these workers. And again, it's building the pipeline, ensuring that the employer's needs are being met, that there's productivity and efficiency in the system. And the workforce system can play that critical role. This was done using philanthropic dollars, but this is, again, a real opportunity to think strategically right now about public and private partnerships. So I'll stop there.
That's fantastic. It lands the way that you're thinking about combining the places where continuity is a good thing for predictability and stability, and where the systems need to evolve at the same rate or in order to inform how technology is evolving as well.
Great.
Yeah. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, great. So at Stand Together Trust, we're a social impact philanthropy, and skills really cross everything that we do. We do housing policy, AI, energy, workforce, immigration. Skills touch all of that. If we think about how we're actually going to address any one of those policy areas, we've got to think about the ready workforce to build the data centers, to build homes. The energy consumption, well, we need folks who are trained line workers to go build, whether it's a windmill or a power plant or a nuclear plant. And so skills cross all that we do. It's not just about a siloed policy area. The good news is that I think skills policy is moving in the right direction. I think the national dialogue among politicians on the right and the left, they're talking about the right things. Skills over credentials. We've seen that. 25, 30 states now have taken some action to remove degree requirements. The private sector's following suit. So the demand signals are starting to move in the right direction. Our systems now have to align to match that skill signal, not just the credential signal. And I think states are moving faster than the federal government. Workforce Pell, certainly an advancement that was welcome. Is it transformative? I think it's innovative. Transformative, we'll see. I think that's where states will lead the way. For context, I sit on the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia, so when I reference Virginia, it's self-promotion for a state that I care deeply about. And I also sit on the national board that recognizes accreditors. And so when I talk about accreditation as being a woefully insufficient model for validating skills, validating credentials as it exists today. I'm speaking for myself, not the org, but I think it's critically important that we have that dialogue because that is a federal policy play. It's somewhere that the federal government must get involved if we are going to prioritize skills over credentials, over just completion. Those outcomes matter, wage, job placement. So I think skills policy moving in the right direction. Where I'd say we're getting it wrong is we're still funding systems. And so if we're going to get this right, I look at bright spots. I'm going to draw on a bright spot that emerged from the very contentious government shutdown over the holidays, where the fight over the ACA Obamacare subsidies was front and center. President Trump made a comment that he would rather see those dollars, those subsidies, go to individuals and families than big insurance companies. Well, I see that as promising. That's an opening for us to then say, take that same empowerment mindset and let's think about how we fund skills pathways and education pathways. Imagine if worker learners had access to those dollars and could use those dollars, felt empowered to use those dollars where, how, and when they wanted. And those dollars didn't just go to a program or an institution, but instead families could tap into those dollars. Take that one step further, our safety net system needs full reform. We have a lot of skilled workers who are sitting on the sidelines, trapped by our safety net. An empowerment type account is something that's been talked about. It hasn't received true traction. But I look at that one bright spot from that comment that the president made, and I say, there's a window, there's an opening. Because any bright spot that I can look at and point to right now, I'll take. And so if this is the moment that we can start talking about funding workers and empowering workers and families to decide what's best for them, rather than empowering a system designed not for the worker, but for the convenience of the system, that's the moment I'm excited to be in. And that's where I'm drawing from what's working in states to elevate that to the federal conversation.
I want to build off the way that you ended that because you both referenced work that states are doing right now and innovation that was seeded at the federal level that really either built on what the states are already doing or the states have now run with. So when you think about that interplay between where there's states, where there's federal action, whether it's now or under the previous administration, what do you all think about in the big picture of where skills as an economic policy issue can go? Whether it's based on what's happening now in 3 states, in 48 states, or whether it's an idea that's coming to fruition through some of the conversations happening on the Hill, the administration, or in rooms like this.
Sure, I can start again. So I have 4 areas of focus that I want to share with you. The first is that I do think what's critical right now, and the National Skills Coalition has been saying this forever, is that workforce policy, any policy, but for me, workforce policy should be people-centered. And it seems intuitive, but it isn't, as we know for those of us who have worked in DC for a long time. So what do we mean by that? We mean that we're actually engaging workers and unions and employers to really understand what the needs are, but from a people-centered, really understanding what workers need. What are their pinch points? What kind of skills are they looking for? What kind of jobs do they want? And really building from there. The second is that we really need to rethink the policy process and bring implementation into the policy development process. It often happens at the end. And for those of you who have had to implement these programs, it's really hard. So how do we actually make that part of the actual design of the program? So ensuring that the design is people-centered, implementation is in the forefront, and narrative and comms are part of it. So people-centered policy is core. The second I'm going to talk about is the need to continue to invest in the care economy, which is so critical. It's a $6 trillion economy. It's over 1/4 of our GDP. And it's the jobs that undergird the rest of our economy. And yet, these jobs are mostly not good quality jobs. And we know that rising costs in care are a major driver of the affordability crisis. So we need a skilled and ready workforce, and we need these to be good quality jobs. The third is we really need to break down the artificial barrier between workforce development and worker rights. We really think that anytime we have a workforce development program, workers should also know about their labor rights. They should know about health and safety, and they should be trained around that, because it actually makes an informed and a safer and a more equitable workplace for everyone, including for employers. And then the fourth, I would say, is to really develop the training program so many of you have started in the clean energy economy. I know right now there are many headwinds that that sector is facing, but I don't think it's the end of that sector. I think this is the time for us to really invest in the workforce and the innovative training programs in this sector, really build those alliances with employers, support new employers who are in this work, and really build out the pipelines, build out the programs, and make sure, again, it's people-centered.
Those completely land, and Steve, you and I had talked about that same frame of being worker-centered and people-centered. If you want to plug your upcoming book, I'm sure folks would love to hear about it. And can you carry on that theme when you think about what a visionary environment, even more than system, would look like that actually centers workers? Where do you focus?
Yeah, so I've been really steeped in this work for the last 6 months, writing, eating, breathing, sleeping, safety net education, workforce. And to me, anything we're doing around skills development without good navigation to good jobs is a mirage. It is a mirage. We are tricking individuals into thinking, go get this program, get a degree, get a certificate, get the skill, and then sending them out into a labor market that doesn't recognize, respect, or even reflect what they've learned as a need in the business. And so this is where good navigation, that looks like the public sector, the private sector, and the philanthropic sector showing up in the right way. For government, what that means is government's best at scale. They're not good at getting into the nitty-gritty details of programs, of holding the hand of every individual. And so when government comes in, if they know their role, if they can help ensure scale, but not get in the way of stifling innovation, that's great. If business comes in and they know their role, and business makes sure that they're not essentially skirting their responsibilities, and when I say skirting their responsibilities, providing good jobs with good wages, meaningful work and opportunities to contribute, and not effectively outsourcing some of that to taxpayers and to the public sector for people who are working hard and working full time. They need to show up and they need to recognize their role and the investment that they need to make. Nonprofits shouldn't try to replicate the scale that government has. That's just not possible. Nonprofits cannot fill that level of scale for 80 million people. And so everyone's got to come together and build these navigational alliances in communities who are closest to the problems. This is where I want to see states and locales lead. And in the book, we lead with people, we lead with stories, and we lead with solutions, not policy. Because if we lead with policy, this is where we jump the gun and we get policies that 10 years from now don't reflect the reality of how people live, work, learn, play. And we're another 10, 15, 20 years until the next reauthorization. So we're already woefully behind if we lead with policy. So this is why we lead with people, stories. Talk about how they've traversed the impassable landscape that exists and still made it work. The barriers that they surpassed, the barriers that need to be removed, the bottom-up solutions across this country, the innovators like folks in this room who are doing the hard yeoman's work to make it possible, to make winning achievable. We start with those stories. We start with what's working, and then we slowly get policymakers bought in. Because if you start with policy, it becomes a red or a blue issue. And solving poverty and solving skills is not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. and it needs to be addressed so that we get the millions of Americans who are sitting on the sidelines, those who are underemployed, who have a credential, who are earning a low wage, immigrants who are here and have skills and are ready to contribute. All of those individuals face systemic barriers in society, whether it be our safety net system, how we've designed our education system, how you have to show up to a workforce board or a workforce program, and when you can show up and access those resources. It's all broken. And so the way we start that is at the local level by asking what's working, how did it work? I mean, in some cases, we're chronicling solutions in Detroit, Denver, Dallas. For all intents and purposes, these programs should have failed. These people should have never succeeded because the deck was so stacked against them. Yet a community came together and they found a way. So let's figure out what they did, that secret sauce, and turn that into policy development. And that's what we're doing.
The themes across the two, not that I really thought we were going to have a contentious conversation, but we could have, given some of the things that you all focus on, and instead just the synergy across what you're both saying resonates with what we hear from our network consistently, and completely makes sense around an issue that we're talking about being important to a diverse set of stakeholders and to policymakers. The hard work, now maybe. When you think about bridging those two visions that you all shared, first, what's predictable, what's within reach, what might be those steps forward that folks are going to encounter today in meetings or over the next few months, with that vision of making sure that industries like the care economy and energy have the pipeline of workers, and making sure that our systems reflect what people need when they're moving through them. What bridges that work? And what are the opportunities that folks can realize today and tomorrow, both metaphorically and literally tomorrow, when we're having conversations about what happens next? Steve, maybe I'll start with you on this one and let.
Yeah, so as I think about that, this idea of empowerment accounts, I sort of brought this up. We have got to tackle all points of this problem, and it is the safety net, it is how we fund workforce development, it is how we fund higher education or post-secondary education. We can't touch any one of those and sufficiently address this crisis, the workforce crisis that we have. AI, we don't have that. Now I'm an AI skeptic. Appropriately so, I think ChatGPT, Gemini, they've got it wrong.
Split the room in
enough,
half, and you can
I'm like,
have,
all right,
yeah.
You're not replacing us. You get it wrong too often. But it is certainly changing the world of work. And as we think about entry-level jobs, employers are already writing off entry-level work. AI is displacing those jobs. So for young talent who doesn't have work experience, how do they get their first middle skills job? We've got to start thinking about that. So that's better opportunities when they're in a K-12 setting. It's getting them work-based experience early, internships, externships. It's getting them civically engaged because you don't have to be in a classroom to learn some of those entry-level, early career aptitudes, skills, abilities. So we've got to find ways to get young people involved and then document that learning. So I know there's a lot of work around learning and employment records, competencies. We've got to figure that out because as those early career jobs go away or are displaced, we risk an entire generation sidelined at the point where they need to enter their career and start their earnings trajectory and start saving. Otherwise, we're going to have an entire generation ill-prepared for retirement, potentially without health care benefits. And so that's one critical area. The other is our jobs will look very different from year to year. People will move in and out of roles more flexibly because AI is changing that nature of work. So we've got to reshape our entire systems. The fact that somebody, if AI changes their job, displaces their job, and they move to a different employer, the mere fact that they may have 3 employers in a 2-year period means they have 3 different benefits plans, health benefits plans, 3 different retirement plans. So just the mere way that we actually structure W-2 work or structure the employer-employee relationship has to change. If we know people are more fluidly, flexibly moving through the world of work, like empowerment accounts, how do we ensure people own their benefits? And so Stand Together or National Skills Coalition, if I move employers, you don't own my retirement account or my health benefits. I pick, I own, I carry that with me. Now you can invest in those as an employer, but that's how we've got to make work more portable, because as people relearn skills and change careers, as we all will, that is going to be a sticking factor that keeps people in jobs or limits the ability of them to take a job or an opportunity that they would want to because they are chasing a benefit, not the opportunity they want to chase. And so this is where it's so interconnected. That's why we're addressing everything from benefits, housing, healthcare, you name it, at Stand Together, because it's all interconnected to how people will just move through life in the coming decades.
So nothing big.
Nothing big,
Okay.
nothing big.
Pronita, where do you see the two pieces of where we are and where we could be being melded together?
Sure. So just building on what Steve was talking about with AI, you know, I think we need to think about AI dynamically. There are really big questions about the future of work, the future of workers, and how that impacts skills training and education. That being said, I do think that there are some exciting opportunities. Again, going back to the care sector, you know, how do we think about AI and technology as augmenting and supporting workers rather than replacing workers? So, for example, there is a tool called Care to Translate. So for monolingual caregivers who have clients, they are able to use this, what I would call, from the Star Trek days, the universal translator, to be able to communicate with their clients and their clients' families and to provide medically accurate information. So tools like that actually help workers. So how do we continue to support that, think that through, and actually make sure workers and clients, the people who are going to be impacted, are actually informing those models, those AI models. The second is workforce training. You know, we know that AI is creeping into that space. So again, where is it most useful and helpful? Can it be used in the public workforce system to do some of the, you know, the resume writing and interview skills and job search skills? I know that's already being used, but how can that be used in a way that then frees up more time for people working in the workforce system to give more customized and individualized training? How does it free up more dollars for actual training and support services? So how do we think about AI in these ways and where we can try to find those points of opportunity? I'm just gonna end by saying the last piece, I know you're all going out there, and I love Steve's recommendation about telling stories. A big story to tell is why we need good jobs, not just any job, but why these jobs need to be good. What impacts do good jobs have in your community? How does that actually translate to a stronger local economy, stronger state economy, improvements in the lives of working families, and actually improvements for employers? It's a win-win-win. And so how do we tell that story about the continued need to invest in good jobs, not just any jobs? And as part of that, if we're investing in good jobs, especially if we're using public dollars or procurement dollars, how do we not only ensure that the jobs being created are good jobs, but how do we also ensure that there are dollars set aside for workforce development, training, and education from the get-go? Is one of the biggest sadnesses of my life that part of Build Back Better got dropped in the bipartisan infrastructure law and in the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS and science. We didn't invest in the workforce development. That should have been part of it. So how do we do that as you all are talking about the kinds of investments that are needed to create good jobs? That also comes hand in hand with ensuring we're actually investing in the workforce system.
I'm inspired. I don't know that I'm going to a Hill visit, but I'm inspired to go up on the Hill today to have some of those conversations. I mean, the themes that you all raised, I think, are so important for us to be continually thinking about. One, serving people instead of systems. Two, recognizing the change that we are anticipating from technology and helping that both be informed by and empower workers as well as local businesses. I hear you both talking significantly about partnerships, about how none of us is going to do this alone, not a sector, not a system, and it is going to take helping policymakers understand what that actually looks like for us to make some of the changes that you all are highlighting around making sure that workers are getting into good jobs, that industries are supported, and that people have a safety net and the resources to not just access a program, but succeed in it. I personally would love to just go hide in the corner and continue this conversation with both of you. But thank you both for being here, for sharing your expertise and your perspective, and helping us have a conversation about how we move things forward at a time when it can feel like there are roadblocks, no matter which road we're taking. So thank you both, and I hope everyone here will join me in thanking Dr. Taylor and Pronita Gupta for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.